What is up, everybody? This is Jannelle, and welcome to I Got More. I am so happy that the NBA is back. I'm been pleased with the presentation and the gameplay has been solid considering the layoff for the past 4.5 months. And I believe that the product will only get better as we head to the playoffs. But before I begin, I want to give a special shout out and kudos to the Oklahoma City Thunder for kneeling ahead of their game against the Utah Jazz on Saturday night. As you probably already know, Oklahoma State Rep Sean Roberts released a statement this past Friday warning the team that he would re-examine tax benefits if the team decides to kneel. And first of all, that is a violation of freedom of speech. And right now, we already know what this movement is all about. And it's been explained 50-11 times. And I do not want to make it 50-12. But I digress. We have two dope games on the schedule tonight. The Bucks take on the Heat, and the Rockets take on the Lakers. And joining me to talk about it all and chop it up is Five Reasons founder Ethan Skolnick, Gyro Step host Windisch, and Rocket superfan Brit Robotista. Now let's get into it. I'm joined by none other than Five Reasons own Ethan Skolnick. How you doing today?
I'm good to be with you, Jannelle, and I'm happy you got the show going because we're gonna build this thing out. So I'm happy to be one of the first guests on I Got More.
Yes, I'm glad to have you. And tonight is going to be the Bucks and the Heat. And last time it was amazing what the Heat did. Bam contained Giannis, made him uncomfortable. The Heat hit a lot of shots, hit a lot of threes, if I'm not mistaken. This is like a couple of weeks before the pandemic. What do you think that the Heat should do in the reboot?
Well, Jannelle, I think, everything comes down to matchups, right? And I do think that whereas, Milwaukee has had the tremendous season and, they've been historically good. I mean, not just good for this year, but defensively, they're one of the best defensive teams of all time, if you just look at them statistically. But Miami has some answers for them that Miami doesn't have for other teams and that other teams don't have for the Bucks. And the biggest answer that they have is they have one of the few guys in the league who is not only big enough, but also quick enough and smart enough defensively to be able to make Giannis work. And that's Bam. And Bam is the key to everything that will happen in this matchup because he knows Giannis well. They share an agent. They work out together. There's no secrets. And Bam gave the best players in the league a really hard time this year, but he really gave Giannis a hard time. And if you have one guy who can make it difficult on Giannis, it changes the whole way that you can play the rest of the Bucks because their entire offensive game plan is basically predicated on you needing to send help to Giannis. And if you don't need to send help to Giannis, then some of their guys who are a little bit more one-dimensional, the Korvers, the George Hills, maybe Robin Lopez, others on their team. I mean, Brooke Lopez has had an outstanding season. But they've got some one-dimensional players as part of their Ilyasova, as part of their depth. And those guys are not going to get the kind of looks against the Heat that they get against teams that have to send 2 and 3 guys to Giannis consistently. The other thing is the second best player on Milwaukee, Chris Middleton, is somebody that Jimmy Butler matches up well against. And so you've taken, the 2 most important players on the Bucks, and you've basically not neutralized them, but you've made them work. And I think defensively, whereas Miami struggles against some teams that are very point guard reliant, I'm not taking anything away from Bledsoe, but they do struggle against teams that are really dictated by their point guards. They won't struggle as much against them. Now, on the other end, Milwaukee's whole strategy is pack the paint and force you to shoot threes. What does Miami want to do? Shoot threes. And so when you have the best three-point shooting team in the league by a percentage basis, and you got Duncan Robinson, you're forcing Milwaukee to play out of character defensively. And so I'm not saying the Heat are better than Milwaukee. I'm just saying when you look at the other teams in the Eastern Conference, Miami is the one that presents, in my view, the most matchup problems for the Bucks I don't think the Bucks present the most matchup problems for the Heat. I think Boston does. And so, again, I think this comes down to matchups.
So I got joining with me from Blue Wire's Gyro Step and a Wisconsin Herd reporter. His name is Ty. Ty?
Yeah.
Ty
Yeah.
Windisch. How you
Hi,
doing?
Windisch. I'm good. How are you?
Okay. I am doing fine today. We have a great matchup tonight. Your Bucks is playing the Miami Heat, and the last time that these two teams faced up, the Heat got the better of them. And, Bam Adebayo really did his thing defensively. What can the Bucks do to counter that?
I think the most important thing is going to be something that's important for them in pretty much every big game, every big situation. They need to get out of the mud against Miami. Miami's defense, like you said, with Bam Adebayo guarding Giannis, he's one of the best Giannis defenders in the league. Jimmy Butler is obviously another great defender. They can put him on Chris Middleton. The Bucks need to remember to run their offense. And last year, their biggest issue, and obviously on full display, losing 4 straight games in the Eastern Conference Finals, was if they got gummed up, if they got stuck, like if Giannis couldn't just drive and get to the rim, which over the course of a regular season, like teams not game planning, teams not, focusing that hard on an individual game, most of the time they were fine. They could just live that way with sort of Giannis attacking, creating space, scoring, or dishing it to somebody who scores. They realized that wasn't going to work at the highest levels. And I think that won't even work in the regular season against Miami, who's just very good defensively and a bad matchup for the Bucks. So they need to do things that they've been doing, such as like the Chris Giannis pick and roll is the number one. They've been doing that a lot more. That's something they need to definitely go to against Miami. And even some other pick and roll, they just need to run more actions. Sometimes they get a little lazy and they just try to like break down defenses without running as much. And that's when they get in trouble, especially against a team like this. I think the more we see of like Giannis at the top of the key trying to drive against Bam, the worse it's going to be for the Bucks, just because he'll score sometimes. I mean, he's going to be 2-time MVP. He's a great player, but it's just not a good matchup for the Bucks. And I think they're going to have to be smart in what they run, and they're going to have to be they're going to have to keep doing it. You can't get lazy and just have a couple possessions where you fire up an early 3 or just try to take Bam off the dribble. It's just not good offense, and that's the kind of game Miami wants against the Bucks. You want to get out and run and try to get some easy points, and definitely not just fall into that trap of, oh, I'll just take this guy, because their main defenders are really good, and they added a couple more good ones at the buyout or the trade deadline. Buyout, both, whatever.
Yeah. Their biggest weapon, Miami's biggest weapon, is their DHOs. They run a lot of things out of their DHOs. What can the Bucks do defensively to neutralize that?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. The status of Eric Bledsoe is going to be important here because the Bucks obviously give up a lot of mid-range jumpers. That's their thing, and usually they can live with that. But any kind of screen and roll or those DHO actions can really generate some good looks there. But I think the Bucks probably are going to play a lot with one of the Lopez brothers, at least one of them out there, sometimes both. But I think they're going to need to stick to their defensive principles, and that's why Bledsoe is important, because he can kind of blow those up sometimes. He can get around the big or whoever's doing the handoff to stick with the ball and not give up just wide open mid-range jumpers. So I think that's going to be crucial. And then also just seeing how the Bucks go after, like when Miami plays a stretch 5, or if Bam's not in there or if he is in there, like who's Brook Lopez going to cover? Is he going to stick with Bam so he can stay down low, or is he going to be ending up out there at the perimeter? So I wonder if Milwaukee will do some more Giannis at center, which they've done more this season, but not that much in the bubble so far. Some people are wondering if Bud is saving it for the playoffs. I don't know if it's just that or if it's just been matchups, but that could be a counter. Switch everything, Giannis at center, a bunch of wings and guards. That could work a little better, but we'll see what they decide to do. Again, I don't think the Bucks will take this game super seriously, so maybe we'll just see that for a little bit, and we'll see it more if there's a playoff series. But I would think those would be the big keys for Milwaukee there.
Okay. As far as Giannis at center, have been done just for experimentation or out of necessity at some point?
It's been mostly experimentation. They've been the Bucks have been a little banged up this year, but it's almost always been the guards. Like Chris Middleton missed some games, Bledsoe's missed some time, and then they slide in Dante to the lineup. But they've had it almost the whole season. They've had both Lopez brothers healthy and active, and at least one pretty much every game. So it's not that they've been forced into it. They've actually tinkered with it more and brought it out more to do some of that switch everything type defense. And sometimes, I mean, they'll do stupid. I mean, sometimes Ersan will be at center and he'll play drop coverage. I don't know why. I think I would try to switch there and not put all that on Ersan, although asking him to switch is a lot too on defense. But no, they've actually been experimenting with it a little bit. It's one of those where it's so tough because you want to say they should go to it a lot in the playoffs and in other moments because obviously those lineups have been really good and Giannis is so great and it gives them more versatility. But also just Brook Lopez is really good. So you don't want to go away from him automatically too much because he's such a good player. And now the threes are falling again. He's a legit DPOY candidate and all defense guy. So it's tough to find the line, I think. I think they should probably do it a little bit more than they do. But their defense is a really good, best in the league already. So you can kind of see why they don't experiment too much. But they do a little bit.
Okay. In that game also, I remember Miami hitting a bunch of threes. How can the Bucks, what can the Bucks do to guard the perimeter better? How would they be able to run these guys off the line, especially like somebody like Duncan?
Yeah. They're just going to have to be more vigilant. This is something that absolutely killed the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals again. And I go back to that series a lot. I rewatched the whole thing a couple months ago. It just felt like such an important referendum on where they were. And if they can't fix the mistakes they made there now, I don't think they'll get that much farther this year. So I think they just need – sometimes they get a little too distracted by the main action, especially – I mean, guys helping so far off where they're not even really going to be able to do that much if they do lose their man. Like they're too far to really provide that much help. And the most frustrating thing is oftentimes it doesn't even look like help was needed. Like it would be Kawhi isoing somebody and either Chris Middleton or Malcolm Brogdon is actually doing a pretty good job on him and he's got a contested shot, but here comes somebody wandering over to do nothing really but be in the vicinity, and then Fred VanVleet is open or Kyle Lowry or Norm Powell, etc. So I think they just need to be very disciplined, especially whoever's guarding Duncan Robinson. That player needs to be told, like, don't even look at the rest of the court. Like, just stay right in that guy's jersey because he's such a weapon. So I think that's the main thing is just like don't ball watch, don't action watch. And, if somebody gets beat, somebody gets beat. But I don't think you can leave, especially Duncan Robinson and also like even Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard if he's playing. I can't remember. But those guys, you just can't leave them open. It's just way too good of a look for Butler, who we know we can find them.
Okay, how do you feel about where the Bucks are defensively since they returned to the bubble? Remember that they are like number one in the league in defense. Did you see any drop off, or is it the same, or even if did they even get better defensively?
I don't think I'd say they got better. I think there's been a little bit of rust. I think there's been a little bit of, and part of it too is they haven't had Bledsoe yet, who's a key part of that defense, even with all the struggles he's had, especially in the playoffs. He's still a very important defender for them. And even Pat Connaughton. So and Marvin Williams has been out recently as well. So they're playing Sterling Brown, who's a good defender who sometimes gambles a little bit too much, but not normally in the rotation. And they've been playing Ersan Ilyasova more, which they'd kind of moved away from him because he's not a modern defender, to put it very mildly. But I'd say they've looked a little sluggish at times. They've looked a little lazy at times. But then you can see, especially – like 4 or 5 starters or like 5 guys who are in the rotation, like, really, they're going to play a lot of playoff minutes guys. Sometimes they'll just like snap into it and just start when they're on and they're really focusing and playing. It's so hard to score against them. I mean, they go just about 9 deep, all with good defenders when they're fully healthy. So I think it's not been like they haven't had one game where they were consistently playing great defense, or not in the seeding games, at least so far. But I think you can still see the capability to flip the switch is there. So I'm not worried about it. I think they're going to be at the same level at least that they were during most of the season.
Since the Bucks have the best record in the league, first in the East, pretty much sewed up at this point, how do they guard against being complacent as the playoffs approach? Remember, it's just only 8 games, and the games are for like everybody else pretty much. How do they go from, being complacent but not overdoing it and showing their hand when the playoffs come?
I think the key for them is really going to be you're not going to play the guys a ton of minutes, but earlier when they were first announcing the schedules, I was kind of thinking about it and I was like, maybe you keep Giannis and Chris and those guys in the 20s for minutes for some of these games. But now I don't really think I'd do that anymore. I think the conditioning, it's going to be better to play them at least 30 minutes in most of these once they're really up to speed. So I think you just need to, for the team, they need to think about how their last season ended and use that fire to get through and use these games to get up into the peak shape instead of just trying to laze through them. I think the urgency will be decently high. I mean, this team has a ton to prove, right? Like individually, players like Giannis and Chris, I mean, if they ran off a title and Chris looked like an all-NBA guy the whole way and was big in clutch moments and Giannis hit some big shots, I mean, that changes their careers forever. I mean, Giannis, you assume at some point wins a title in Milwaukee or otherwise, hopefully in Milwaukee, hopefully he only plays there. But you think it's coming. But a guy like Chris, his whole legacy changes. I mean, so many vets on this team who have never won one. Like, this is a hungry team. It's not like the fourth-year Warriors or the fourth-year Cavs where they're really sick of this yet. I don't think they're there. I think they have a lot to prove. So I'm not too worried. But I think the one thing that could lead to some complacency is you get the rest of these seeding games, and then that first round series is not going to be a very serious series. So it's kind of until the second round when they actually play someone who's going to be a threat in the playoffs. So that might be something where maybe they take a couple quarters off. But I'm hoping, the fire of wanting to prove so many people wrong who call them frauds and all this, hopefully that keeps the energy level pretty high.
Now, what do you think is the X factors for the Bucks in this game against the Heat? And the X factors as the season and the postseason progress?
Well, they're going to have to figure out ways to get Bam off of Giannis's back a little bit. I think that's going to be the number one thing. Like they're going to, like I mentioned a little bit with the pick and rolls, I think they're going to have to do even more though. I think they should experiment with Giannis off ball a little bit more. I don't want like Giannis posting up Bam. I don't want that at all. Again, I like Giannis. He can do some good stuff in the post. His fadeaway has actually come a long way. But Bam is a great, stout, strong post defender. Like, I think that's a waste of time. So I think they need to get Giannis moving more, like off ball, like setting screens, rolling to the rim. And obviously, if Bam's not out there, then that changes, and you can kind of just go at whoever. But I just think the term I always use for the Bucks and the Heat is stuck in the mud. The Bucks need to get out of the mud. And that's what Miami's going to try and do, is stick them right in there and not let them run, not let them get any lanes to the basket. So I think they need to improvise a little bit and maybe actually get the ball out of Giannis's hands a little bit more to then get it in his hands with an actual lane to the rim.
And this is for the Heat, the game against the Heat. But what about as we move forward, as far as like when they face, for example, if they face Philly or if they face Toronto, like in future rounds, would those X factors change a bit?
It changes a little bit. I mean, I think all the great defensive teams, I think it holds up for a lot of it. But I think it's kind of connected to the real X factor, I think, for their whole run is, like, can Chris Middleton be as consistently great as he was in the regular season, for whatever 20 straight games in the playoffs? And that's what they need. That's at the end of the day, and not to put too much pressure on, a player who I very much like and I think is very good, but if he's not that guy, all of a sudden it's like very, very hard for you to win a title. And if he is that guy, I think they should be the favorites. I think he is that guy. That's why I think they should win it. I don't think they guaranteed win a title this year. I mean, there's a lot of great teams out there, but I think they have the best shot because I think he is that guy. But he needs to be like running pick and rolls, isolating, post up, like using all of his offensive weapons. He's been driving a lot more, which is good to see him get some work in there. But he needs to be a high possession superstar. He needs to be putting up 25 plus a game. He needs to be taking a lot of shots, dishing the ball, getting the ball to Giannis in those pick and rolls. We've seen a lot of that in the games in Orlando already, which is very encouraging. But he can't like go 2 for 7 and with like barely any free throws and just stop shooting and stop handling the ball because they don't have another guy. I mean, they have other good players, but he needs to be the primary initiator for a lot of stuff. and he needs to get Giannis the ball in those advantageous positions. So if he's playing at like a 28 points, 7 assists clip on really good efficiency in the whole playoffs, all of a sudden they become almost unstoppable. So that's really the number one X factor is, can Chris Middleton prove he is a legit star player, or will he, like he has in the past and sometimes, have a couple games where he's just abysmal and doesn't really shoot and gets kind of out of the flow of the offense, and then all of a sudden it's just like it's kind of a coin flip if they win or not. They just kind of have to get lucky and stumble into some points.
All right. Is there anything else you would like to add before we leave?
I just think I hope it's a good game. I hope it's a fun game to watch. He's a controversial player, but I think I'm a fairly big Jimmy Butler fan. I just think he's a very good player, and I think it doesn't always come out right, but I think his heart is in the right place with what it tries to do with teams. So I look forward to watching him and this team. I think it's a perfect fit for him, even if I don't think they're a great fit for the Bucks to play. So I just hope it's a good game and everybody stays healthy and it is in playoff shape by the time they start.
All right, where can we find your work? Where can we find you?
All over on social medias at Ty Windisch, TIWINDISCH, but Twitter's the main one. So I do the Eurostep podcast that you mentioned graciously on the Open with Rohan Kadi. That's all things Bucks. We do 1 or 2 of those a week usually. Otherwise, I write a lot of NBA stuff on Patreon, including I break down every roster move. I just did my awards ballots, all sorts of fun projects there for $1 a month. So that's patreon.com/Ty Windisch. So those are the main places: Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, the podcast.
Well, I thank you for coming on my show, and you're welcome to come on anytime to talk about the Bucks.
I look forward to doing so. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
I have Brit Robotista joining me. She is a diehard Houston Rockets fan, and she is raised in H-Town, and right now she's in the Bay for work. I'm glad to have you on my show today. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
I am doing great, and tonight your Rockets are playing the Lakers. And what's really fascinating to me about the matchup is the Lakers are missing Avery Bradley, and I know the Lakers struggled with perimeter defense, especially with Toronto a few days ago. Kyle Lowry lit them up for 33, and I'm sure the beard is going to feast. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's a couple of things that I am very interested in seeing. First of all, like you mentioned, I think the perimeter defense issues with the Lakers is going to be a problem because the Rockets, I think everyone knows that they love to shoot the three, and they are willing and able to shoot it whenever it's available. I think the Lakers, in their game versus the Clippers, they were able to sort of get away with it. Actually, let me take off this. They were able to get away with it because they were able to get away with, mostly getting away with that win because the Clippers were, they are more willing to drive into the paint and score and, give it to either, Kawhi or Paul George, although Paul George had a ton of threes that game, and as well as the game that they had versus, a few days ago. So I think what the Lakers are going to be, concerned about is if Harden or any of the other, really good three-point shooters, such as Ben McLemore or PJ Tucker in the corners, or Daniel House or why am I blanking out on his name? This is too much. Or Daniel House, or if Covington can actually, get over his 3-point issues. If they are, making a lot of threes, then it's going to be a problem. Looking back at the Dallas versus Houston game, a lot of the issues that Houston was having was that they were not able to, get Trey Burke to stop shooting threes. They, at the beginning they were playing, good, solid defense versus, Dallas the first, I would say, halfway through the first quarter. Once the Mavericks started to, double and triple team Harden, everything sort of fell apart. So, on one end, the Lakers are going to definitely try to, most likely double and triple team Harden to sort of force everyone else to, actually make shots and contribute to the game. But, the Rockets are going to, sort of have to force it and, see if they can do something similar to Toronto, where initially, it was a relatively close game between Toronto and the Lakers until the Toronto, especially with Lowry, getting almost everyone on the Lakers into foul trouble, he was able to, get them to, sort of get away from their defensive stance. I think Houston's probably going to do the same thing as well.
That's interesting. And speaking of Houston's defense, and they have a permanent small ball lineup. And I'm just curious to wonder what are their strategies to contain LeBron and AD? The Lakers have size.
Yep.
I'm worried about them defensively.
Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to the defensive strategy, a lot of it's going to be to hedge on PJ Tucker, serve as the 5 in the small ball lineup. And PJ Tucker is, the defensive quarterback, so to speak, when the team is playing on their defensive rotations. When it comes to, covering LeBron and covering AD, a lot of it is, I think ultimately they're going to, make their shots, if they are. LeBron actually hasn't really had a great time in the bubble so far. During the game that they had versus Toronto, he had the lowest, his lowest field goal percentage of the year, if I recall correctly. So I don't know if, LeBron's going to continue to have these low numbers, but I think the one thing's for sure is that at any time he will, sort of go off. And so can AD when he has the opportunity. I think the advantage that the Rockets have is that they have a slightly deeper bench compared to the Lakers. And I think that will allow them to get a better advantage on the defensive front, especially towards the end of the game. AD is a wonderful defensive player, but when he is on the floor by himself, it seems like he gets sort of he doesn't take advantage of his size and sort of his abilities, and he isn't able to get the players around him to get the best. So I feel like that's why, LeBron has had this MVP type season, because when he's on the court with AD, he's able to take the alpha role and get both of them to have the most success. But AD can't really do that with the bench units. So I think with, PJ Tucker and Covington are going to focus on, containing as much as possible AD and LeBron. That's when, Houston will be able to leverage their, what they are saying is their improved defense, which hopefully will, show it a little bit better compared to what they did versus Dallas with the Lakers. So even though, size is an issue when it comes to the AD and LeBron, I think outside of that, Houston does have, some advantages with the defensive stalwarts that they have with PJ Tucker and Robert Covington.
And another advantage that Houston has, but on the offensive end, is the Harden and Brody pick and roll. And I'm just curious to see how that will be deployed tonight. What are your thoughts on how they're going to deploy that? Against AD and LeBron?
Mm-hmm. I think it's going to really depend on, if Harden is going to go more off the ball. I think the first game that we saw versus Dallas, Harden wasn't able to do that at all because, he was, scoring, substantially 49 points during, in that entire game, and, with 7 points in overtime. So I think when it comes to Westbrook and Harden, that pick and roll is going to pay a ton of dividends, especially when LeBron is off the court. LeBron loves to, do those. He loves to, come from behind and, get the late blocks, which could, cause an issue when Harden and Westbrook are trying to, roll into the paint and get that pick and roll going. But when LeBron's off the court I guess the question is whether or not or Harden and Westbrook are both going to be, sort of on the court the entire time that AD and LeBron are going to be on, or if they're going to sort of, do the rotation as they've done regularly where, they're both on the court during the, most of the first quarter and most of the fourth quarter, but then stagnate throughout the rest of the game. I'm very excited to see how they sort of use the pick and roll. And also, I think the other thing to keep in mind as well is that Harden loves to do pick and rolls with other players as well. Most recently, anyone who has been the roller for Harden, he's been able to get that ball to them, relatively quickly. So when Houston is able to get the fast break advantage, having, whoever is acting as, quote unquote center in the dunker spot will be able to take advantage of the pick and roll opportunities. And I think that's going to have to be the key, especially since, the Lakers are going to want to slow down the Rockets. If they can get those pick and rolls and, prevent the Lakers from slowing them down too much where it's a grind, that will be, an advantage for the Rockets moving forward.
That is interesting. I've always said that the Rockets would thrive better with Westbrook being on the ball. I say that because his shooting percentages isn't like Harden's, and it seems like he's more effective when he is breaking down the defenses, when he drives. But, Harden is so used to being on the ball that it's kind of an adjustment for him to be off the ball as much. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they have been transitioning from Harden, being mostly on the ball to, Russ doing that more recently. I think the scrimmages showed that a lot more compared to the first game versus Dallas. I think that strategy of having Harden off the ball sort of deteriorated during the Dallas game because one, the Mavs were just, gunning and making almost all their shots, especially, Porzingis earlier in the game, Trey Burke throughout the game. They were, just gunning and, Harden had to, score the 49. Yeah, he had to score those 49 points. It wasn't like an option for them to sort of switch it off and have Harden off the ball. Bradley, out because of personal reasons of the bubble. It will be interesting to see who may be taking lead on Harden. And I think in that case, once that's determined, that'll be whether or not if the team expands on having Harden off the ball or not. And one more thing to think about is that the team also, I feel like in a lot of ways they may be hiding some of the stuff that they are, that they may utilize during the playoffs. They've been there have been some instances where they've that we've actively seen some new themes that the team has used, but ultimately, they may be, using I think they're using the seeding games as Harden and Mike D'Antoni have both said that they are ultimately using the seeding games as a, chance to sort of test out new, schemes and mechanisms. So it may be that they play the Lakers straight off or straightforward and do everything, but at the same time they may be holding back for, hopefully a potential Western Conference Finals matchup between them and the Lakers. But we're a long way off from that.
Speaking of which, what do you think about their odds, as going forward? Harden believes that it's their year to take it back to Houston, and they've been so close in recent years, but just couldn't get over the hump. And what ways? What do they need to get over that hump? I mean, I know you say that they got new schemes and all, but it's going to come down to matchups and of course the size thing. Of course, is you got a small ball lineup just about most of the time on the floor. I mean, just what are your thoughts on the whole field, even beyond this Lakers game tonight?
Yeah, I think the Rockets have a really good chance. I know a lot of people say that Harden has previously, choked because they lost against the Western Conference champion last year, Golden State Warriors, and then the year before that, the NBA, champions, Golden State Warriors. But that's the thing, is that their losses have been against teams that have eventually gone to the finals or even won the finals. I think that the Rockets have been underappreciated with how hard and tough they have played against teams. They are never like out of a game. The few times that they have been blown out, there have been, certain things that have happened before that, could be factored in. And in the playoffs, they have shown that they are, they will fight back tooth and nail to try to get, those victories. I think when it comes to the playoffs this season, the field is really wide open. Probably the most wide open in the West in the last several years. I think everyone, sort of thought more or less that the Warriors were going to win. And, even though the Rockets had, their chances and opportunities, because of a hammy, they weren't able to win and, get past the Warriors in 18. And last year, they just weren't able to, pull it out because of, various drama and other things that happened with the rotations. So I think that the Rockets, I won't definitely say whether or not they can, win the championship. I'm not so bold to do that, but I think that they have just as much of a chance as anyone. And I think the one strong thing is that they have continuity. Most of their starting lineup, minus Eric Gordon, who is, currently out because of an ankle sprain. I think it was grade 1 or grade 2 ankle sprain. He, besides him, every single person who's in the starting lineup has been on the team for at least 2 years, and they've gotten used to each other, substantially. I think that's something that's not thought about when it comes to the other teams, where they've only been together, a full year at this point, since, there was the break in between. A lot of the teams, are still trying to get used to each other. So I think the teams that are going to have the most success in the bubble are the ones who have that, continuity between each other.
That continuity and chemistry.
Yep.
Yes. And you do bring up a good point, because, most of the teams, are just formed this year. I mean, as far as different lineups and things. So Houston have, with the exception of Russ, have been together for the longest. And also what I'm looking at is, let's see. Yeah, and continuity and it breeds chemistry. Mm-hmm. A lot of people underrate chemistry, but that is so important. Even with some of the best teams on paper, it's nothing without figuring out that chemistry. Even the Warriors had that issue when KD first joined to figure it out. But yeah, a lot of people don't even realize that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think it's just, just put them in and playing like it's 2K or something. It don't work that way, and it never has.
Yep, for sure. Yep, and I think the one last thing to keep in mind is that, even though Russ, is the new addition, he had experience for multiple years with Harden, and they grew up with each other too. So it wasn't that, he was, they never knew each other before, or, were just acquaintances. They knew each other, they had background with each other, and I think that's sort of shown, especially in the last few months before the, this virus sort of stopped play, and even more recently during these games. Even though they've had issues, I feel like for the first time, Russell and Harden have a person that they genuinely like and appreciate their feedback. I don't know if you saw during the game versus Dallas, Harden got mad at Westbrook got mad at Harden for making a lazy pass during overtime. I think that's probably the first time where you saw someone and Harden was okay with someone like getting mad at him for something. And I think
that's in the heat of the battle, though.
Yep.
Even CP3 got mad at Harden. I think it was like the last season that they were together, or the season before that, and people made a big deal out of that. But that is the heat of the battle.
Yeah,
it happens. That doesn't mean that there's a ongoing beef.
Yeah. No, I don't think I guess I'm not really saying that there's an ongoing beef with that either.
I know, but I'm just saying, just for clarification, when it comes to people and how everything is perceived in social media, and we know how Brody is.
Yep.
He's like that. He wants to win. He really wants to win. And for him to yell at Harden, I mean, that shouldn't even be surprising. I mean, that's what I'm saying. But with everything, when it comes to Twitter and Instagram or whatever the case may be, is going to be magnified and amplified by people who haven't really even played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that's what makes the conversation when it comes to the Rockets really hard, outside of Rockets Twitter and people who actually sort of ignore sort of the bias that goes on, is that I think the Rockets have a really good opportunity because they one, have matured a lot. I think the Dallas game really showed that. Previously, if they were even though these are seeding games, previously if the team and even earlier this season, if the team got, sort of blown out like the Mavericks were doing in the second and third quarter and a little bit in the fourth quarter, they would have just sort of, let the game go. I think how they sort of came back and showed endurance, and sort of showed that, hey, we could, beat Dallas even if they're up by 15, 20 points. That's something that other teams should have concerns about when facing the Rockets, is that they're never going to just let up and let go with the game. And I think that with the struggles that Russell and Harden have had individually, I think they have shown this year, when actually listening to their interviews and not just listening to Twitter or Instagram slander that people sort of write around, that they're wanting to win. And of course, all players and all teams do that, but I think they both have seen the adversity when it comes to losing, especially getting so close to that goal of winning a championship. And I think they really have this passion and will to get to hopefully the promised land of finally winning a ring.
And if they happen to not win the ring this year, what do you see the future of that team? You think Morey is going to try to add more pieces around Harden to get it right, or they're going to disassemble?
I don't think they're going to disassemble this season. And that's just because of the contracts and the salary cap situation. The salary cap with all the Corona issues and concerns is going to be a really big issue, especially for the Rockets, who even right now are slightly under the luxury tax line, but will most definitely go over it unless the NBA makes some changes to the salary cap in the short term to, sort of help the teams that would be substantially over the salary cap because of the change, because of the revenue losses due to lack of fans and other issues as well. But I think also the Rockets, in general, I think they're probably going to be together at least for one more season as this core unit. There may be some changes. Austin Rivers may be, going somewhere else because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent after the season. So I could see him potentially leaving. But I think when it comes to almost everyone else, they're on, 2-year contracts or more. So I think that when it comes to this team, it's probably more likely that unfortunately, Mike D'Antoni may be the one to go before they disassemble. Morey, I don't think he's going to be fired. He signed his contract 2 years ago, and it was a 4-year contract. And I don't think that Tillman Fertitta, who's the owner of the Rockets, is going to eat both the GM contract and the coaches. So I think it's more likely that the Rockets core, minus 1 or 2 pieces, stays about the same going into next season whenever that starts, and they potentially find a new coach besides Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I thank you for your time. This was very insightful. And where can we catch you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Brit Robotista. So BritRobo. I always get the name. You would think I'd be able to spell my own handle, but it's longer than heck. So you can find me at Brit Robotista. That's at BritRobotista. And then I also am, sort of writing and doing a ton of things on there. And I'm also on Instagram. So I just write for myself right now. Yeah, so I have a blog spot right now that I sort of write for myself. And I've been writing both things about about the Rockets as well as my, current job search and other things like that. And that's at britrobotista.blogspot.com.
Okay, I'm going to be very transparent here because you know your stuff about the Rockets. And, if you ever get a chance, hit up the Dream Shake. Hit up Dream Shake and shoot your shot. Because that's what I did with Golden State of Mind. So I have a background in journalism, and I wasn't really thinking about doing sports writing, but something in me one day said, go ahead and just see what's out there, and I just saw where the Warriors, SB Nation site was looking for somebody, and I just shot my shot and say, hey, I'm doing this, introduce myself, and I got on. And ever since then, I've one opportunity turned into another, into another. And it sucks that I'm not with SB Nation anymore, but I have I have opportunity with this and other things. And, if you're really passionate about this, Brit, shoot your shot. Hit up Dream Shake. I'm sure that they have something for you. And I hope that they do, because you're really knowledgeable.
Oh, thank you.
Very insightful.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate the time that you gave me. And I mean, I definitely appreciate any, sort of things that could be going on. I love the and I think that's probably the one thing that I guess the NBA is the one thing that we can all appreciate equally. Yes.
And I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Brit Robotista. I want to thank my guests, Ethan Skolnick, Ty Windisch, and Brit Robotista, for speaking with me today, chopping it up. Until next time, see you next Thursday.